I want everyone to reflect on a time when somebody else did something seemingly ordinary that positively influenced you. So I'll share a time about 3 years ago when my husband Keith and I moved here. I didn't know anybody except for my mother and father-in-law. And my husband was a first-year medical resident and was really busy working and often on call. So I went to church a lot, by myself a lot. And after a couple months of living here, I hadn't made many friends yet. And so one Sunday, I felt determined to make connection and get to know some other people at church. Well, after many attempts, I started to feel discouraged, and church was getting older, and I sort of felt kind of like a failure at this. And as I was leaving, a woman stopped me, and she chatted with me, and we got to know each other a little bit more. And from an onlooker's perspective, that might seem insignificant, but to me, it was a big deal. 3 years later, I still think about that experience. So this woman was an example of an everyday leader. So then let me explain what is everyday leadership. Well, when we think of a leader, we often think of a president or a CEO or a celebrity or a sports star, some unattainable position. But that's not always the case. Everyday leadership is something even more. During my research, I found this study that was done where 62 managers were observed from cutting-edge environments. What they found was that everyday leaders are event-driven activities rather than intention-driven. So, in other words, another everyday leader should utilize improvisation and the ability to tune in. So then what does that mean? What is an event-driven activity or an intention-driven activity? Well, an intention-driven activity is something where an end result is determined before steps are made for getting there. In other words, it might be somebody who is less flexible and demanding and less understanding of people's needs. And then an event-driven activity is one that takes more innovation. It is somebody who responds takes input and reacts. In order for there to be more everyday leadership in the office, we need to be able to interpret other people's actions and make sense of them. So the woman from my story, she was a really great example of an everyday leader because she interpreted my need for a friend and my need for conversation, and then she took action. So this next slide, this is a great example of why it's important to be able to interpret things correctly. So basically it says that butter is good and it's good for you, and that it lubricates your veins and arteries. So that's pretty obvious, right? How many have heard of this book called Leadership in Self-Deception? Well, if you haven't heard of it, you should look it up. It's a really great book, and I challenge you to read it. It's a really quick read, only about 100 pages or so, and it won't only help you in your work life, but it will help you in many other aspects of life, especially in your family life. Basically, the concepts of this book are that self-deception is debilitating in all areas of life, and that we should all take responsibility for our own actions. At the beginning of the book, there's a preface that has an analogy in it that helps you to understand some of the principles described in the book. I'll read some of that, but first it starts out by explaining that there is a baby who is learning how to crawl, and she starts out by crawling backwards, and she backs herself underneath some furniture, and she's stuck, and She does only what she knows how to do, but back up, and it only makes matters worse, and she becomes more stuck, and so she starts to cry and thrash and become angry. And if she could talk, she would blame the furniture. But we know that the furniture is not her problem, but she's her, she has her, it's her own problem. But she's only doing what she knows how to do. And so the book goes on to, or the preface goes on to say that self-deception is like this. It blinds us to the true causes of problems. And once we're blind, all the solutions we can think of will actually make matters worse. Whether at work or at home, self-deception obscures the truth about ourselves, corrupts our view of others and our circumstances, and inhibits our ability to make wise and helpful decisions. To the extent that we are self-deceived, both our happiness and our leadership are undermined at every turn, and not because of the furniture. For another school project, I was researching the importance of willpower in a marriage. And to my surprise, I came across a lot of research that showed a strong positive correlation between willpower and leadership. Basically, what I found was that leadership manages willpower. So then, how do we increase our willpower in order to become better leaders? Well, that's when self-deception needs to come into play. When we eliminate self-deception, we're able to realize our potential. And then once we realize our potential, we can set ourselves up to increase our willpower. We can put ourselves into challenging situations or step outside of our comfort zones. And then, as you know, when you increase your willpower, you need constant adjustment. And just like leadership needs constant adjustment, so does willpower. So you can see how those kind of work together to help you to become a better everyday leader. Well, then, how exactly do we become everyday leaders? So, first, we need to prepare. Innovation takes preparation. I liked this quote by this woman. Her name is Rosalind Torres, and she is a leadership expert. So she says that prepare for the realities of today and the possibilities of tomorrow. And I really liked that because that helps us to be able to observe and then respond to our observations in order to create an event-driven environment. The next thing that we need to do in order to become a leader is to take more risks. So increasing our willpower can feel kind of risky at first because we're stepping outside of our comfort zones. And eliminating self-deception from our lives can feel risky because we might feel the need to place blame on something. But once blame is taken out of the workplace, it can become a great environment. So then now I want everyone to reflect back on the experience I had you remember at the beginning of my presentation where somebody positively influenced you. So thinking about that, have you thanked that person? You may have or you may not have. But either way, we're learning that leaders are people who are more thoughtful. So I came up with 4 challenges for all of you. And the first one is to thank those who positively influence you. The second one is to be an event-driven leader. Observe people around you, observe actions and emotions, and then take action. The third challenge is to step outside of your comfort zones and increase your willpower. And then finally, eliminate self-deception and resist the urge to place blame on others or yourself. Thank you.